The evening sun draped the horizon in a warm amber glow, casting long shadows over the rolling acres of land that Marcus Johnson had called home for generations. His family's ranch, nestled beside a secluded lake, had been a sanctuary for him, a place where he could reconnect with nature, find peace, and honor the legacy of those who came before him. On this particular weekend, Marcus decided to set up camp by the water's edge, pitching a small tent and preparing for a quiet night. Under the stars, the gentle lapping of the lake against the shore, the rustling of leaves in the wind, moments where he felt deeply rooted in both, the land and his identity. As he settled in, the peace he had come to cherish began to feel increasingly fragile. Unbeknownst to him, the property lines that separated his family's land from the adjacent parcels were not clearly marked. Years of sparse fencing and overgrown vegetation had blurred the boundaries, leaving a patchwork of ownership that could easily confuse even the most diligent neighbor. And on that evening, a misunderstanding would ignite a chain of events that would test Marcus's resolve, dignity, and the very idea of justice. A few hours into his evening by the lake, a vehicle approached, a dusty SUV climbing the uneven terrain with purpose. Out stepped the local homeowners association representative. Without taking the time to investigate, she called the authorities, her voice laced with panic and accusation. To her, this was an unknown presence, a potential threat, and in her eyes, an intrusion that demanded immediate action. She could not see the man's history with the land, the hours he had spent maintaining the lake, or the quiet joy he derived from moments alone in nature. All she saw was a black man by the water, camping where she believed he had no right to. By the time the local sheriff arrived, Marcus had already begun to notice movement on the periphery of his camp. He emerged from the tent, hands raised, wearing only the calm assurance that comes from knowing your own truth. The officers approached cautiously, their questions clipped and procedural. Yet beneath their professionalism lay an undercurrent of suspicion, fueled by the urgent report from the HOA representative. Marcus explained his presence, detailed his familial ties to the land, and offered identification that verified both his residence and property ownership. But the tension in the air was palpable, thick enough to slice through the still evening. Like a blade, as the officers conferred with the HOA, Marcus remained patient, his gaze steady on the lake. Memories of history, the countless stories of black men being wrongfully accused, challenged, or threatened simply for existing in spaces deemed unfamiliar or unsafe by others, flooded his mind. The injustice was not unfamiliar, yet it was always jarring. Each story carried with it a weight, a reminder that dignity could be questioned at the whim of perception rather than fact. Marcus, however, refused to let fear dictate his response. He understood that confrontation could escalate quickly, that misunderstanding could spiral into danger, and that maintaining composure was not only a matter of self-preservation, but of principle. Hours passed as the discussion unfolded. Maps were examined, deeds referenced, and property lines scrutinized. Slowly, the misunderstanding became apparent. The area where he had pitched his tent was, indeed, within the bounds of his family's property, but the repercussions of their actions reverberated far beyond the simple call to the police. Marcus felt the sting of having his presence questioned, the subtle reminder that being black in America often comes with an unearned scrutiny, that even rightful ownership cannot always shield one from the assumptions of others yet. Amid the tension and the uncertainty, a quiet strength emerged. Marcus began to see the situation not as an attack on his person, but as a moment that could educate, illuminate, and challenge preconceived notions. His decision to remain calm, respectful, and firm became an act of courage, a refusal to succumb to indignity while simultaneously asserting his rightful place on the land that was his inheritance. As night fell, the stars reflecting on the calm surface of the lake, a reminder that vigilance and dignity often walk hand in hand, especially when one's identity has been historically marginalized. The following morning brought clarity. Though the emotional residue of the previous night lingered, Marcus sat by the lake, watching the fog rise gently from the water, his mind replaying each moment. The fear, the uncertainty, the momentary loss of peace, these were not trivial feelings. They were evidence of how easily prejudice and misunderstanding could permeate even seemingly ordinary interactions. But Marcus also recognized the power in his response, the calmness, the refusal to escalate, and the ability to claim his truth without resorting to anger or confrontation. Word of the incident spread through the local community, first in hushed tones, then through conversations laced with both curiosity and judgment. Marcus felt the familiar pang of being scrutinized, of his actions being interpreted through lenses tinted by assumptions about race and behavior. Yet he also encountered unexpected allies, neighbors who knew his family's legacy, who respected the land and its stewards, and who recognized the injustice of the moment. These voices, quiet yet steadfast, served as a reminder that dignity could be reinforced by community, and that truth, once revealed, had a resonance that fear and suspicion could not easily drown out. In the days that followed, Marcus made a deliberate decision to transform his experience into an opportunity for education and awareness. He invited the HOA representatives, as well as local leaders and law enforcement officials, to walk the property with him. Together they traced the borders, observed the natural landmarks, and reviewed the deeds and maps that established ownership. Marcus spoke calmly, but with unmistakable authority, about the importance of respect, clarity, and the dangers of assumptions rooted in bias. He did not frame the conversation as accusation. He framed it as enlightenment, an invitation to recognize how easily misunderstandings can escalate when coupled with prejudice. Through these interactions, Marcus began to witness a subtle shift. The HOA representatives, who had initially acted out of panic and misjudgment, started to comprehend the gravity of their error. Their initial defensiveness gave way to acknowledgement, had consequences far beyond their immediate perception. Marcus's demeanor, composed and unwavering, made it impossible to dismiss the incident as trivial. By embodying both assertiveness and grace, he demonstrated a principle that resonates profoundly in moments of conflict. Authority grounded in truth and dignity cannot be undermined by ignorance or fear. The emotional toll, however, was not easily erased. Marcus carried with him the subtle reminders of historical injustices, the stories passed down from his parents and grandparents, tales of black men being wrongfully accused, harassed, or violently confronted simply for existing on land in neighborhoods or in spaces that should have been familiar. He thought of the countless others whose stories never found resolution, whose dignity was denied without recourse, whose courage was met with indifference or hostility. Marcus's experience, though resolved in his favor, highlighted the persistence of systemic challenges, the everyday vigilance required to claim one's rightful place, and the quiet resilience demanded of those who navigate spaces often defined by both visibility and vulnerability. Yet, amid the reflection, Marcus also felt a profound sense of affirmation. He had faced a moment that could have been demeaning, frightening, or disempowering, and instead he had chosen a path defined by principle. By standing firm in truth and dignity, he not only asserted his rights, but also created a space for learning, empathy, and understanding. He demonstrated that courage is not always loud or confrontational. Sometimes it is the quiet assertion of truth in the face of misunderstanding that carries the greatest weight. The lake, the tent, the land itself fall became symbols of both vulnerability and strength. Markers of an encounter that could have been purely traumatic, but instead became instructive and transformative. Marcus began to share his story publicly, carefully and intentionally, through social media, community forums, and conversations with those who might benefit from hearing it. His narrative was not merely about the incident itself. It was about dignity under scrutiny, courage in the face of uncertainty, and the power of education to bridge gaps of understanding. The story resonated with many, evoking empathy, prompting reflection. An inspiring dialogue about race, privilege, and the everyday realities faced by black men, asserting their rightful presence in spaces they own, maintain, and cherish. As the days turned into weeks, the incident gradually became a touchstone, a story that highlighted both the challenges and the possibilities inherent in navigating spaces often fraught with bias. Marcus's family, friends, and allies celebrated the resolution, but more importantly, they recognized the enduring lessons embedded in his response. His composure, clarity, and courage had transformed what could have been an ordeal into a demonstration of resilience, dignity, and leadership, a reminder that justice is not merely the domain of courts or legal authority, but often begins with the quiet, steadfast assertion of truth by those who refuse to be diminished. Months later, the lake was calm once more, reflecting the serenity Marcus had fought to preserve. The incident had left its mark, both on him and the community, but its ultimate legacy was one of empowerment, awareness, and reflection. Marcus had confronted the uncomfortable realities of suspicion and bias, yet he had also shown the transformative power of patience, dignity, and principled action. The story of that night, the call to the police, the confrontation, and the eventual acknowledgement of his rightful ownership served as a reminder of the persistence required to navigate a world where perceptions can often overshadow facts. Marcus continued to cultivate his land, but he did so with a heightened sense of responsibility, became an advocate for clear property demarcation, transparent communication between neighbors, and education around the historical and ongoing challenges faced by Black property owners. His experience became a catalyst, sparking conversations that reached far beyond the confines of the ranch or the HOA meeting rooms. Through workshops, community events, and social media engagement, Marcus shared his insights, emphasizing the importance of respect, understanding, the courage to assert one's truth in spaces often fraught with uncertainty. The story also highlighted the subtle power of legacy. Marcus's family had endured decades of systemic challenges, yet they had nurtured a sense of pride, resilience, and stewardship over their land. By calmly and assertively claiming his place at the lake, Marcus honored that legacy, demonstrating that dignity and courage are inherited as much as they are learned. He became a living testament to the idea that Black men can and must assert their rightful presence in spaces historically threatened by prejudice, misunderstanding, or outright hostility. Yet the narrative was not solely about struggle. It was also about hope, transformation, and the capacity for human beings to learn from their mistakes. The HOA representatives, initially alarmed and defensive, eventually came to recognize the harm caused by assumptions and the value of dialogue over confrontation. Their change, though born of necessity, reflected the potential for growth when truth is met with calm persistence rather than anger. Marcus's response created a space for understanding, bridging gaps that might otherwise have remained entrenched in fear or bias. In the end, Marcus returned to the lake often, reflecting not only on the events of that night, but also on the broader implications for justice, dignity, and Black life in America. His story, while deeply personal, resonated with a wider audience, reminding all who heard it that courage can take many forms: the quiet assertion of truth, the patient education of those willing to learn, and the unwavering commitment to principles of fairness, respect, and self-possession. In standing his ground, Marcus had done more than claim his land. He had modeled a pathway toward understanding, justice, and dignity that others could follow, demonstrating that even in moments of fear or misunderstanding, the human spirit, when anchored in truth, remains unassailable. The lake now mirrored the sky in peaceful reflection, a symbol of the calm resilience Marcus had embodied. Every ripple on the water, every whisper of wind through the trees, spoke of a victory that was quiet but profound, a victory not measured by confrontation but by the assertion of identity, dignity, and the courage to stand firm in one's rightful place. The story of Marcus Johnson and the lake became more than an incident. It became a narrative of hope, a testament to the enduring strength of Black life, and a reminder that the pursuit of justice often begins with the simple act of knowing, owning, and defending the truth,